The California State Assembly passed a bill this week which would make it so that parents in custody battles over their children may have the possibility of having their custody revoked or severely stripped down if they do not conform or abide by their child's alleged gender transition. This is crazy. This is criminal. But sadly, it is becoming more mainstream, not just in the state of California, but Washington State, for instance, recently passed a very similar statute. Let's look at some of the details of this statute and why it is so dangerous. This is called AB 957. That's the name of the bill. As mentioned, California State Assembly just passed it, and the California State Senate also passed it, which means that it is currently going up to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk, and it is anticipated, barring any crazy extenuating circumstances, that he will sign it into law. So AB 957 would, according to the Daily Signal, quote, require judges in child custody cases to consider whether a parent has affirmed a child's gender transition by making gender affirmation an equal part of a child's health, safety, and welfare under state law. So this statute was introduced by Assemblymember Lori Wilson. She is a Democrat, and she has a transgender child. She wrote the bill, and the bill was supported and also somewhat co-authored by State Senator Scott Wiener, also a Democrat from San Francisco. So Gavin Newsom has said that he supports legislation such as this, so he will probably kick this one over the finish line and make it a part of California law very soon. So as I mentioned, this is very similar to a law that was passed in Washington State, which also made gender affirmation a consideration in parent custody battles. And in Washington State, there was also this provision that if a child runs away from home because his or her parent does not affirm, whatever that means, his or her gender, then the group home or the shelter at which the child fled to has no obligation to notify the parents of that child's place in that shelter, because the parents are so bigoted and they don't deserve to know where their child is, lest they go and try to take their own child back into their custody. Here in this California statute, gender affirmation isn't defined. So that leaves it very open for loose and wide-ranging interpretation. So does that mean if you don't repaint your daughter's room blue because your daughter now identifies as a boy, that you are not affirming your child's gender and that you perhaps deserve to have your custody stripped? Is that what gender affirmation means? Does it mean that you have to abide by certain pronouns, no matter how ridiculous those pronouns are? We're seeing from actually California public schools that there's this increasing trend of students coming in and demanding that they be called furries or frogs or lions or pillows, or insert something absurd. The point is, that's now a way of identifying. That's now a pronoun, not just he, she, they, them, z, li, qui, whatever the heck those are. You literally can have to be called a frog now in certain public schools if you say that you are a frog. So according to this new statute, if gender affirming means subscribing to pronouns, then if you don't call your child a frog when your child wants to be called a frog, you may have your custody rights stripped away from you because you are classified as abusive under the statute. There is no criteria, there's no definition for what gender affirming means. That's one of the many problems with this statute. Another is that it says nothing about the age of the child. What if your child's 4 years old and they are truly just imagining or watching on TV in the new woke Disney movie that they are identifying as something different? Does that mean that if you don't affirm that 4-year-old, then that child fits the criteria of being abused and you would have to be taken from them? It's absurd. The statute also says nothing about how long the child identified as transgender and whether that would play a role in whether or not the parents, quote unquote, affirm their child. And most strikingly and terrifyingly, under the California Penal Code, threatening the standard of, quote, health, safety, and welfare has criminal penalties, abuse and neglect. So with this wide open, unspecified nature of this statute, it could be very possible that a parent, in addition to having their visitation or custody rights revoked, could be subject to criminal penalties, including jail time and fines, under this law because they violate that standard of health, safety, and welfare. Elon Musk, the owner of X and SpaceX and Tesla, tweeted out, quote, "This bill is a wolf in sheep's clothing. What it actually means is that if you disagree with the other parent about sterilizing your child, you lose custody. Utter madness." That is exactly right, of course. What's going on here is that we are in a different kind of civil rights battle in the 21st century. We talk about the civil rights era in our country as the fight to have Black citizens treated equally as white citizens in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Yes, that was a very legitimate and real civil rights battle that happened, but we think of the civil rights stuff as being over. This is the new civil rights battle. Whether it is really right to sterilize your child, whether it is right to affirm the fantasies and the delusions of a minor, or if all of the things that I just mentioned are absurd and criminal. You fall into one of the two camps. There's really no middle ground. You are either on the right side of history on this one, or you are not. And it is clear that the state of California is not. It is criminal to do this to children. It is criminal, as we are seeing at Boston's Children's Hospital, at Duke University Medical Center, at various other hospitals, to give puberty blockers, to cut off the healthy breast and genital tissue of young people in the name of this gender affirming care. That is criminal. And now it's criminal to say that a parent that is trying to look out for the best interests of that child, to try to slow that process down and go, maybe this is not what you identify as. Maybe we need to take a minute and really evaluate if this is legitimate. Now that parent is being criminalized. The evil that is wrapped up in this is truly unbelievable. We also see that in addition to hospitals providing this care, which is really abuse, gender affirming care is gender denying abuse. In addition to states like California and Washington stripping parental rights, we see that children in schools are now taught to identify with a gender that is the opposite of what they were born into. This is a proselytizing movement. People say, oh, when we teach 4-year-olds about gender fluidity, we're just trying to inculcate tolerance into them, make them tolerant of people who maybe are gender nonconforming. That's not tolerance. That is actively trying to make converts. When you are taking highly malleable young children whose brains are not fully formed and developed, the canvas of their mind is hardly painted, and you go and you try to tell them all of these things, you are actively trying to reshape who they are into what you want them to be. That is proselytizing and converting children. In the Arizona Department of Education, they have talked about, or they have a rule that starting at 10 years old, you have to teach children that gender is non-binary and it is fluid, and you should avoid using gendered pronouns. Similar diktats are issued in the New Jersey State Department of Education codes, here in California, specifically in the LAUSD codes. It has gotten so absurd and mainstream, so mainstream that even our military is now subscribing to this gender madness. The Pentagon, for instance, made a decision to use gender-neutral terms such as themself instead of himself or herself during decoration and award citations for those who have served. In addition, the U.S. Army Pacific Command, which is a division of our military, has issued rules saying that you should not use gender language when referring to someone with whom you are serving. And also, just to add on to it, it's not pertaining to the gender issue, it's just pertaining to the you can't label people issue. You can't call people sergeants in the U.S. Army Pacific Command because it makes people who aren't sergeants feel bad that they aren't sergeants. This is not a fringe movement. Specifically, this gender madness is not a fringe movement. It's coming into schools, it's coming into the media, it's coming into your TV screens and entertainment, it's coming into medical practices, and now it's coming into laws that deal with your rights as a parent to have custody of your child. When will we realize how out of control this civil rights issue has gotten? When will we finally wake up and stand up to it? Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed this. Hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay notified of every Julie Noted news video and timeless episode. Take care. I'll see you soon.